This episode is sponsored by Linode. Linode is offering listeners of this podcast a $20 credit, which is good for 4 free months at their lowest plan. Their plans start at 1 gigabyte of RAM for $5 a month. You can get your servers in any of their 10 data centers, and their high memory plans start at 16 gigabytes. Get a server running in under a minute. They do hourly billing with a monthly cap on all plans and add-on services like backups, node balancers, Longview, etc. VMs for full control, running Docker containers, encrypted disks, VPNs, etc. You can run a private Git server. They provide native SSD storage, 200 gigabit network, and Intel E5 processors. They have 24/7 friendly support, even on holidays, and a 7-day money-back guaranteed. So go check them out at linode.com/rubyrogues. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 350 of the Ruby Rogues podcast.
Woohoo!
This week, we got kind of a small panel. We've got Dave Kimura.
Hey, everyone.
And David Richards.
Hello.
And I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. I should just go by David or Dave or some other variant of David, right? David. Call me David.
Welcome to the club, huh?
Yeah. I just don't fit in anymore, I guess. Anyway, I tend to, I don't know what it was. I think it was just episode 50 we did something different, and ever since then it's just kind of been a sort of tradition to just kind of do whatever we want for the whatever 50th anniversary episode. So yeah, it'll be kind of interesting to just see where we wind up. But one thing that I'm kind of curious about, just to start things off is, you guys have been on the show for, I think Dave, you said you've been on for like a year or something at this point. David, You've been on for a while. So I think just to start out, since, you haven't been on for a ton of time, just kind of tell people where you're at, professionally, like where you're working, what you're doing there, and also just kind of paint a picture of kind of what your daily life is like.
All right. So I guess since I have the seniority over David here, I guess I'll go first. So I'm still at the same job. I'm with Sage Software, and it's been a great company to work at. I've been there for almost 9 years now, which is crazy to believe. I didn't always start out in... I know. I'm quite the anomaly. But, I do want to say about that, even though I've been there for so long, and I think people kind of start to develop habits when they get into a repetition or pattern. And I've tried very intentionally to not get stuck in my career. So I constantly learn. I'm constantly doing new things, playing around with Stimulus, with other JavaScript frameworks, and also just continuing my education largely through what I'm doing on Drift to Ruby. But I try not to stay stagnant in what I'm learning. And I think that's something that a lot of people fall into that trap when they've been at a job for so long. So if that is one of your worries, don't worry. You can still stay committed to a company while keep learning and progressing with your own self. And then with Drift and Ruby over the past year, actually just more recently in the past few months, it went pro. So I have a subscription base now where users can sign up and, pay me a small amount monthly for access to the pro resources, some of the pro episodes. And I'm actually, shameless plug here, running a promotion for $9 a month through the end of February. And after that, it goes up to $15. So if you haven't signed up, support me, yay, and get some awesome tutorials, what I think is awesome. So, that's really it. I haven't had any new kids. The past, several years, it's been like I had a new kid every year. So I'm up to 3, and I think I've kind of, hopefully stagnated there and won't add too many more to the mix. But, it's great. I love them, and I definitely try not to I try to have a good work-life balance, and work I'm lumping in what I do with Sage, what I do at home on the computer at night. And I try to make sure that when the kids are up or when the wife is up, that I'm spending time with them, quality time with them, not checking my phone and stuff like that, just to, try to have some kind of separation between all of this Ruby world and then my real life daughter, Ruby.
That's dedication. I love it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I've been up to. So I want to say that not much has changed, except everything's changed because it's a whole year later. I've learned so much in the past year, and I still love what I'm doing.
Awesome.
Love it. You can only cross the same river once, right? It all changes, even though it looks the same. And you can say the same job, but it's new challenges and new experiences, and you're different.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome. So I've been doing well too. My day job is at a company called DiviPay, and so we are a Fintech company, which means we deal with all kinds of security issues and money issues and bank issues and people issues, and it's fun because the work matters. I work on the core team there, and I do the data science there. So that means that I'll be spinning up data models on a typical day. I use a lot of Python. I use Ruby. I use a lot of Elixir. I use whatever tools I need are. So I end up in a polyglot day. I don't know what my day is going to look like. It's based on what I'm trying to solve and where I'm at. But it's pretty fun. I found that, over the years, I've been doing this long enough. I really enjoy the work and the thinking, and it's a privilege, I guess, to be able to just get up and solve a problem and do something that matters or that I think matters, or care about what I do. So yeah, that's my work, my main work. And then I write a lot. I find that for me anyway, I've learned all these programming languages and I've learned all this tech and patterns, but what I've learned is abstractions, and I've learned shortcuts, and I'm learning to slow down and relate to people and to connect more with how other people are experiencing their lives. And so what I practice is just writing. I write English. I write articles. I write fiction. I write every day. And what that's doing for me is it's kind of like learning a new programming language. It's like, oh, okay, I get it. There's some learner over there that I'm writing an article for, and I'm seeing if I can teach them and I can empower them and get clear on what they need to know and what they don't need to know, and try to keep myself from getting off the deep end too often, and have fun with people. So I do that. And family life is great. We're just about empty nesters in our family. So we've got our oldest lives with us. So we're getting there early. I'm in my mid 40s, and so we've got a boy in college, and he's moving out of here soon. And then my other two kids, they live with their mom, and it's just life is more about what I give to it. And it used to be all about, okay, I've got to hit the job. I've got the young kids. I've got diapers. I've got this, run around for the kids. And now it's just more about what do we want to do and what's important in our lives. So
it's interesting. I can't even fathom anything close to empty nest, right? Right, Dave?
Yeah. You mentioned diapers. And it's like, there's clean diapers, unused diapers all over the house.
Oh, yeah.
The kids get in them and different sizes and reorganizing them. It's just, our house is a tornado event every single day.
Yep, absolutely. I know exactly what you're talking about. So, yeah.
There is another joy, though. Like, as you guys are talking about that, my almost 17-year-old just texted about learning CSS and JavaScript and starting a domain, and I never thought he'd code. So it's really fun on this end too, because they're taking life on. It's pretty awesome to see them learn too, and to be fresh with it, and excited the way that they're excited.
Nice.
Until they start critiquing your code.
Which he's done. He's done that. He's been right. Well, he likes to keep things really clean. And I can sometimes just use duct tape and baling wire to get the job done. So
you may give me a code review, but I'm still the parent.
Clean your room. I'll clean the code. You go clean your room.
There you go. So I guess I should chime in here too. So I think people are pretty aware that most of what I do these days is work on stuff around the podcasts. Now I know some people ask me the question, so I'm just going to answer it right here on how much do you actually get to code, right? Because usually I'm emailing people and lining up guests, or I'm emailing people and working on like the remote conferences and things like that. And the honest answer is it depends on the week. I do actually schedule time to code, which is kind of weird to think about, for most people that listen to the show, because you have to schedule the time that you're not going to code, right? To go to do your meetings and your other stuff. But for me, that's kind of been the focus. And most of my code actually revolves around the podcast too. So I've been working on a system that helps manage the podcast workflow. At this point, it's fairly usable as far as scheduling the podcasts go. And I'm just about to pull everything together so that Zapier can connect to it. And that way, as people schedule, because we use Schedule Once to get people on a calendar. And so, I'll just use Zapier because I don't want to build the calendar piece. So I'll use Schedule Once. It'll hit Zapier. Zapier will hit the system and make sure that it's in the calendar. So anyway, that's been fun and interesting. And I've really been enjoying that part of things. And then, I work from home. I think we all do, actually, or at least part of the time. I think Dave does some of the time. I know David most of the time, I believe.
Much as I can.
Yeah. So I'm here at home running the show here, and I get to see my family pretty regularly. Now I'm married. I have 5 kids. My oldest is 12. My youngest is 2. And so it's funny because it's a 2-year difference between all of them except the last 2, which is a 4-year difference. And that really just came down to the fact that we had trouble getting pregnant the 5th time. Go figure. But it's just a different feel of life. In the last 2 weeks I've been traveling, so it's like what does work feel like again? So anyway.
Man, you leave your wife home with 5 kids?
Well, 3 of them go to school. So it only half counts because they're gone half the day. Half of them are gone half the day. My oldest is actually homeschooled, so
oh wow.
So that's an interesting mix to go in. But he has ADHD, and he has some behavioral issues that make it difficult for him to sit through school all day long. And he's not a bad kid or anything, and he's not getting bored. It's just the nature of the way that he is that we had some incidents at the school, and so it was like, well, we'll just pull him out. So we did. But I spend a lot of time just kind of doing life. But a lot of what you said, Dave, really resonates with me because it's like, look, I'm doing this, and then I spend, I'm out getting quality time with my family. So.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one thing that David said that really kind of struck some interest on me, and I don't know if you guys want to talk about this a bit, but it was around him using multiple languages, different languages, Python, Elixir, Ruby. And so I was thinking about that the other day, and I was talking with a coworker and some other people, and I think I've came to a conclusion. And it's just my own personal opinion, but I think a lot of us get into a situation where we're not necessarily bored with a language. Like, I do a lot of Ruby, and I don't get bored with it. But sometimes something new comes around, like Elixir, Phoenix, and a lot of people just jump ship from Ruby and go to that.
Traitor.
Yeah. And so,
okay, I am.
I couldn't help
my
it.
thought about that.
I've heard the sentiment expressed. Anyway.
But my thought, I think, has a bit of a twist. Is it's not so much. There's nothing wrong with learning a new language to get under your tool belt. But I think that if you are going to learn another language to get under your tool belt to replace an existing one that does not have problems, for other than the speed or concurrency that Elixir brings, what are you really gaining? The end result, the thing that the client is going to see, in the general cases, if you're dealing with something that has 1 million requests per second, yeah, you may need to shift your focus. But talk about the average application or thing that you're creating. Is it providing any kind of benefit over something else? So I came to the conclusion with the different languages is that if you are wanting to pick up something else, not because you're bored with your current language, but you just want to further your career or open up new doors, I don't know if replacing one tool set that you have with another tool set, i.e. programming languages, is really the right choice. Instead, you should learn another language that will open up different avenues. So if I'm a Ruby developer doing web development or making CLIs, command line interfaces, then if I want to get into something like artificial intelligence or machine learning, then I should focus on Python, because now I will have my Ruby knowledge doing the Ruby stuff, and then I can have a Python that runs on the backend server that does machine learning and all of this other kind of stuff that would complement what I'm doing with Ruby. So it's not a replacement of Ruby, it's a complement to Ruby. And same thing with other languages, whether it's Swift or Java for doing Android development. Don't have it replace what your main stack is, but just learn different things that will complement what you're already doing. That way you're expanding your horizons.
I think that's right. I don't know if I want to admit this, but I'm gonna. So in 2001, I was working on a master's degree, and a good friend of mine is Kendall Oliphant, and he introduced me to his brother Travis. And so Travis is, then he was just Travis, and we had this conversation about Python versus Ruby. He wanted to do some numerical computing, and I had done some numerical computing with Ruby, and I really liked how, I could build DSL, domain-specific languages around my problem, and I liked that. I felt like I could be really comfortable with Ruby, and so I argued, don't do Python, don't waste your time with Python, do this other. And he was working at the time; he was writing NumPy, which is the core core piece. Yeah, he wrote Anaconda, he wrote NumPy, he does all the SciPy stuff. He's getting awards from DARPA. The guy knows how to do numerical computing really, really well. And anyway, so I found it was interesting because we had this conversation, because I thought, that the way I was thinking about the problem was, well, it's still always the people that's the slowest. Make people productive. The rest we can figure out, and I think, though, that, like what you just said, there are tools that are better. And there's momentum. Inertia matters. When we get into an environment where I don't want to reinvent the whole world. I did have a data problem this week that I pulled out Ruby and I solved it beautifully and gracefully. And the people I was with were astounded. It's like, well, yeah, I know how to do what I'm doing. I just use the right tool for the job, and it works out just fine.
Yeah, I really love the ideas behind it. And it's interesting because, this ties back into some of the other things that I've been thinking about. I've had a lot of requests for language and framework specific podcasts, but as I talk to more and more people, what I'm really finding is that areas of focus are the places that I want to go next, right? So we have a Ruby show and an Angular show and a JavaScript show, and we're starting a React show and a Vue show and an Elixir show. But it's funny because I talk to people and they're like, well, where are you going to go next? And as excited as people are for the React show and the Elixir show and the Vue show, when I tell them, oh, well, I want to do an AI machine learning show, and I want to do for developers, I want to do an IoT show for developers. And, we'll probably do a Python show that will cover, help with, it'll be a Python show on its own, but the reason we'd be doing a Python show is because most people are using it in the machine learning space. And it's funny because people get super excited about that. And I think sometimes, we get into our camps and it's like, well, Ruby is awesome for everything. And then the reality is that there's that other part of us that kind of dreams up what we can code. It dreams up what we can create. And so, when we talk about machine learning, we talk about, mobile development, we talk about some of these other areas that we can expand into. I think opening ourselves up to actually expanding into those spaces, even if it gets us outside of that comfort zone that we have with Ruby, I think is really, really valuable. And I think you really nailed it between the two of you, just describing, part of why we are what we are and the way we are.
Yeah.
I love that. I keep going back to what drives me, where my imagination wants to go, what problems I think I can solve. And I love that power. It doesn't actually take that much. We get in, we learn a little bit of language, we get a rhythm, we learn how to troubleshoot a problem when there's a problem. And now we have the base tools. We can usually start building something pretty amazing at that point. And so I love the empowerment. I love the imagination part of it. I love the fact that one person or a few people can do great things. And I also love that if I'm in my comfort zone, then none of that's there. If I'm just comfortable, that I don't have that curiosity, that drive. And I want to learn, get to keep learning. So definitely stepping out of my comfort zone is important for me.
Yeah, and I wish I had more time to do that. But, I say so busy that I've really been trying to pick up some more machine learning, with Python and to expand my horizons a bit. But I find that, there's just not much time to do it. So.
Plus, machine learning is a little bit weird. A lot of things we can learn and pick them up a little at a time, but machine learning seems to be, a little bit of bigger bite. We're going a little bit deeper, and we're talking about things on a abstract layer that we're not used to thinking about it. So it takes a little bit more of a jump, but you can still do it. Find a little bit of time. You're fine.
Well, the other thing is that with typical programming, especially the kind of thing we do in Ruby, yes, it's object oriented, but it's very procedural in my mind, right? We're going to build a system that does X, right? We have all the object oriented tools. We have some functional tools in Ruby, but ultimately it's here's how you do X. And with machine learning, the thought process is, how do I build a system that finds the optimal path to X? And the optimal path to X is still a black box. Even a neural network that has, values on each node that value different things in different ways and blah, 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 blah. And you think about all of that. At the end of the day, it's still a black box. You don't understand why those numbers are there. You just know that in the end, you get the results you want. And that's a completely different type of setup. We're still programming procedurally on how to figure out the solution, but the actual path to the solution, once you give it data or give it, some other thing to work on, is completely foreign.
Yeah. One thing, though, that I've been doing a lot lately is I've just been borrowing from the Ruby knowledge that I have again to solve that type of a problem. We test drive everything. We slow down and create clarity. And, if I'm thorough and clear and I can understand what I'm doing, that's what's required, and so sometimes I just want to throw something out there. Oh, it looks good. But instead, I'll build a baseline model and say, oh, this is kind of the shape. This is kind of what it would look like. Maybe it can get a little bit better, but, try to understand the thing I'm trying to do, I guess. But yeah, the Ruby community is incredibly good at those types of assurances. Reliability matters for us a lot. And I find that every time I'm pulling my hair out. It's like, oh yeah, I loaded data that I didn't test, or I didn't take a look at the shape of what this should look like when I'm done. Mm-hmm. Or it was the same principles, just needs to be applied even with these kinds of problems. Because you're right, I can have this, all these layers of all these nodes, and I don't know what any of them mean. And so I need to have something outside of that starts to tell me, oh yeah. And so yeah, I do. I think about my Ruby heroes and what they've taught me, and whether or not I'm, whether I would be proud in their eyes if they were to look at me today, or they would shake their head and said, we did teach you a better way, Dave. So I don't know.
I was just going to say, if you don't have trouble with anxiety, just program like someone's standing over your shoulders.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what are you guys working on learning these days, or what kinds of projects are you doing? I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, but.
All right. So right now I'm building a bookshelf in my basement so I like doing woodworking, and, I have a CNC machine down there and a laser machine, and my CNC machine, actually, the first version of it, my Mark 1, was built using Ruby. So I built on a breadboard controllers that, controlled stepper motors, and wrote an interface in Ruby that would take G code and then turn it into a multi-threaded working with the stepper motors. So I've since moved away from that, but, that was my fun first outside of web development Ruby project. So I like using that as much as possible. But when I'm not doing the woodworking or spending time with kids, I'm always trying to see, what's out there, what's new, and to see how I can apply it in my daily life on stuff. So right now it's just trying to pick up some Python and really get into that, because as much resources is out there for Python, I think it's still kind of scarce in compared to the Ruby world. So my Ruby's not going anywhere anytime soon. I would say it's probably 10 years before, anything severe like that happens. But I really want to get into more of the machine learning and Python and Raspberry Pi 3 stuff. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
One thing I've noticed in the Python world is there's kind of one true way to do most things. And so the documentation lacks because, there was that one way and somebody mentioned it once. And that bridge between what, people are experiencing, what they need and where they're going is kind of big sometimes. So Stack Overflow tends to be some of the best documentation in Python versus, like Ruby guides we do really well training each other. We've had a long history of that. One project I've been taking on, and it's a little bit off and on because I'm doing it with my daughter. She's 14 and she has school and she has other interests. She has a sleepover tonight. So, I don't know. But we're doing a podcast. We're working on one. So it's data science, local interest, regional interest. We live in she lives in the Wasatch Front. I live on the Wasatch Back. I live on the other side of the mountain, but
I was going to say, I don't know if that's a distinction that people will follow.
Yeah, right. So in Utah, we have the Wasatch Mountains, and the Wasatch Front is where everybody lives, and I live out in the boondocks. But it's called Wasatch Limits, and the idea is that we'll just talk about things like population and healthcare and water and traffic and air quality, because she's interested in this, and so we're mixing our interests. And we've been recording shows. We haven't put anything out yet because we're building a rhythm still. But it's been really fascinating to work at that level, to say, oh, I get it. This is how she wants to think about it, or work with her a little bit. So it's been a really fun one, and I think it's one that we can do for several years, where she'll be interested in this and won't be too busy, I hope.
Interview Cake makes coding interviews a piece of cake. Here's the problem with most coding interview practice. You work on a problem, bang your head against the wall, give up, and look up the answer. And then you're like, what? How do you even come up with something like that? That's why Interview Cake teaches you step by step how to come up with clever algorithms. They break it down into a simple set of patterns that can be applied to any problem. To learn more, check out interviewcake.com/RubyRogues. Ruby Rogues listeners get 20% off Interview Cake's full online coding interview prep course. To sign up today, go to interviewcake.com/RubyRogues. That's really cool. I've been trying to pull together podcasting with my kids for a while. And I got everything set up for a gaming podcast with my 12-year-old, my oldest. And then he started this therapy that they basically limited his screen time. And so we were just about to get it off the ground, and then we didn't. And so, we're and he's, at least for the next little while, I think, still going to be doing this therapy. So I've been trying to find that other topic. So, kudos to you for figuring that out, because, you want it to be approachable for kids and for adults, and you want it to be something that you enjoy doing together, and it's hard to find that balance, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. Plus, and I don't know, I think every parent experiences this, but sometimes I'm overwhelming, and I try not to be. I try to slow down and listen, but man, I can get excited, and just like I would with code, I'll jump in and boom, let's do this, this, and this. Oh, wait a minute, I'm bulldozing my kid here, so I've got to slow down a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, I would be doing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, my son still just pees in his pants because he thinks it's fun. He's 3, so I guess that's normal. He just looks straight at me. Then I see his pants get darker and darker. I'm like, really? Come on, man.
I've got a scene from Breaking Bad in my mind now, where the guy in the wheelchair just stares down the police and just does it in his pants. I'll show you, and you got to clean this up.
That's right. He knows where the power lies.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So most of my learning lately has been more on the business end of things. So I hired a business coach last year. I hired a different one this year. Learned different things from both of them, and I think some people were like, well, why'd you switch? And it was, the first business coach taught me enough about what I needed to know to figure out that I needed the other business coach. And it wasn't that she did anything wrong. It just, she's used to coaching people at a different place in their business than I'm at with the podcasting business. And so, I knew that this other coach had a lot of experience teaching people how to do what I needed to learn how to do. And that basically comes down to building processes around the business, and then, performing and, stuff like that. But that said, I mean, it's funny because I have this superpower, for lack of a better term, in my pocket that I have taken advantage of with a lot of the automation stuff, and that's code. And so I've been building a system. Eric actually kicked me in the head about 4 or 5 months ago, and basically said, because I was complaining about building these processes and then not having people follow them. And he's like, you're a programmer, dude. Write a program that follows the process. Oh, right. And so now I've got a system that helps manage a lot of the scheduling and stuff for the shows. And, this is not something that you guys are using yet, but eventually, I want to build in all of the show prep stuff and the show notes stuff. And that way, and we have to move off of Skype soon. And that's another thing that I'm working on, right? Because Skype changed. I don't know if they changed their terms of service or if I just never read them, but it said, and Dave messaged me about this, but apparently when you record something like this on Skype, you're supposed to mention every 15 minutes you're recording it on Skype. And I'm like, okay.
This call is currently being recorded on Skype.
Yeah, there we go.
So that's why they do it on the radio. Whenever they do a Skype call, they always mention it's on Skype.
Yeah. And, it makes sense, but at the same time, there's so many other systems out there that you can use. So I'm trying to figure that out and just make it all work. But it's, so all of that, and then just tying it all together so that people can easily consume things the way that they want them. So, So most of my learning has been there, but it was funny because I didn't realize when I went back to start building the system. By the way, it's at podwrench.com. It is, you probably won't even be able to figure out how to sign up. But anyway, that said, I hadn't really written Rails for a while when I started building it, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I remember why I love this. And so, and like I said, that was like 4 or 5 months ago, and so I've been working on it since then. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of where it's at, is finding that blend between business and code, and just where all that fits. And what's funny is now I have friends of mine, including that coach that I had last year. They reach out to me and they're like, okay, we see these systems that we can program against. They have an API. How do we make everything connect? And so it's been interesting to have that come full circle now. And I'm actually consulting on other people's business on how they can use code in a way that's different from people coming in and saying, we have this app that needs to be built. Can you do it? And so anyway, it's been really, really just fascinating way to learn a lot of this stuff. And yeah, so.
Yeah. The best kind of business management is the kind that you don't have to do.
Yep, and that's
or
what
you
I'm
can write a
toward.
Program to do.
That's exactly what I'm working toward. Is I'm going to monitor this by looking at the freaking dashboard, right? And then go, it's still doing what it's supposed to do. And then it also just checks in on the status of the stuff that people have to do. And so I can, at a glance, just say, hey, why isn't this happening the way that it's supposed to? Or, hey, everything's happening the way that it's supposed to. Pat on the back, attaboy, way to go. And so, yeah.
I think a lot of people, that's on the client side, they just don't see what it takes or the manual steps that you're doing to make something work. So for like the Drifter Ruby, I was using Stripe. I am using Stripe for the payment processing. And it's not as simple as just connecting Stripe and then you're off and you're going. There's still a lot of day-to-day management that you may do, whether it's running reports or whatever else. So, that was something that I found myself doing, that I was having to access multiple views or pages to get a accurate count of things or whatever. And so, I just tapped to their webhooks and, started to, build a view, write a program that would then just give me a dashboard view of everything that I wanted to see. Because their mobile app sucks for getting an accurate subscription count, and the website doesn't really show you a good accurate count. So
I'm laughing because I have been there. Yeah.
I've done a lot of that too, and not necessarily with Stripe, but just in general, having a pipeline where I can run my life, hey, throw this in here and I'll see it. If that's a dashboard or if that's my inbox, my email inbox or my Twitter feed, there's got to be a way to get things I care about and maybe hold on to one for longer than 6 months. That's my next challenge. I don't know.
Yeah. And, I've automated even stuff like that with work where, we're using a ticketing system, and within Slack, someone may reference, hey, have you looked at this ticket number yet? I have no freaking idea. I cannot correlate that number to a ticket I haven't seen, or maybe I just never took note of the number. So I made Slack wrote a little parser that it would pick up any kind of ticket numbers or what looked like a ticket number, made an API call out to the ticketing system to get the title and a link that I can then just from within Slack click on it to then go in there and access the ticket to have a look at it. So just little tiny things like that I use Ruby for to make my life better.
I like that.
Yeah.
I love Slack for that too. Slack's so amazing to grab what's going on and put it in context.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we've been using Splunk at work, but the same thing would work with the Elasticsearch stack, the Elastic stack. The same idea that, if it's Slack or if it's Splunk or if it's Elasticsearch, that there's a way to put everything in some place where I see it.
Splunk's the logging tool, right?
It is. It's the Elasticsearch is the open source version or the open source replica. Somebody's tried to do what Splunk does with Elasticsearch. So it's dashboarding and it's data pipelines and then some analysis so you can get what you need. Gotcha. It just basically has a map reduced key value store for all your logging or all your events. Mm-hmm. But I found stuff like I can take a spreadsheet, and that's what I use Ruby for sometimes. Is I'll take a bit of spreadsheet, turn it into JSON, create a curl request, and send that up to Splunk. And then everybody has the latest version of what somebody was working on. And then I can cross-reference that with other data from databases or logs and show the whole thing, in context of this is what we think. So it's the informal parts of a business, the parts that don't get done or the parts that somebody does on, that nobody talks about, bringing those together so that we know it's all working. That's I think where an organization starts to really flow together.
I was going to say you're such a nerd, but I was the one that kind of started this topic. So, but yeah, it's just, I don't know. I mean, I've just felt so empowered by so much of this stuff. And yeah, just recognizing, we have the power to really kind of shape way more than just what the app does when we turn the server on.
Mm-hmm. So Chuck, what's your vision for where Ruby Rogues will be in the next year as far as some of the apps that you're running? What would the experience, how would it be different?
So a lot of the stuff that you're asking me about is stuff that the audience wouldn't necessarily see, but I think people are interested in how the sort of how the sausage factory works, so to speak, right? And so essentially the way that I see it is the process kind of starts with getting guests scheduled or getting topics scheduled. And so what I'd like to see is, we typically do that with Schedule Once, but we can also just have, you guys have access to the guest calendar, so you could just block a day out, right? And say, I want to talk about whatever, right? So maybe David feels like, hey, you know what? I've done a whole bunch of Ruby data science stuff, and I'd kind of like to be the expert on that one. And so he puts it in the calendar. But either way, the episode gets created in the system, either through Zapier or Schedule Once or because somebody creates it. And then it contacts everybody involved. So it would contact all of the hosts and say, hey, there's a new episode. It would contact the guest and say, hey, there's a new episode. Come and use this form to put in all of the prep materials. We currently use Google Docs for that. And, the process isn't completely seamless. Let's just put it that way. So, typically Eric is, bugging me a couple days before, where's the Google Doc? And it exists and it's been edited, but, so I just want that email to go out to everybody and say, hey, blah, 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 so you just have to whitelist the one email address and make sure that those get delivered to your inbox. And then it'll also let the hosts know that they can post questions that they either want answered before the show or that they may bring up during the show. And that gives the guest or the subject matter expert some time to they can put a short answer in, and they can also just prep and make sure that they're ready to answer those questions. I mean, obviously you can't prep for everything. Sometimes we just come up with stuff while we're talking, right? It's like, oh, I hadn't thought about this before, but what about this? And so it's not perfect, but it gets us to that place. And then as we record, so then it would send out reminders to people, hey, the episode is in a week. The guest has added the prep information, blah, blah, blah. And that gives everybody a chance to prepare. And that kind of works now, but it's, like I said, it's kind of hacked together and a little bit clunky. So, this would all just be set up and configured by the podcast owner, and all of that would get sent out to everybody. So, it would also send calendar invites to people, and if they reply, to accept or decline, that way we know who's going to show up, And so, like, if ever for an episode, let's say that everybody winds up, we're all going to go to RubyConf, and so everybody declines the episode, then we can reschedule it. We can plan on doing it at RubyConf, but it gives me a whole bunch of information, or whoever's running the show, a whole bunch of information about who's going to be there. Maybe I find some guests to help fill out the panel, whatever. But so that's all before the show, and then when we record, I've been wanting to play with Action Cable for a while, and so I kind of want to set up just a really simple chat. But all it is it's just, people can post questions to it and stuff. It'll work kind of like a chat, but it's also then all of that, it works in the app and gets compiled into information for whoever's writing the show notes. And that way, they don't have to figure out what the heck is RSpec, right? So they go on and, ARSPECK, they're not finding anything, and so, anyway, just setting things up that way. And then WordPress actually has an API. So once the show notes are written, then they can just post it to the system, and it'll put it in the RSS feed, and it'll also put it in on the web page and schedule it to be released at the right day and time. Mm-hmm. There were a few other things. I wanted to do the follow-up with the guests and say, hey, the episode was posted. Here's how you share it. I wanted to, so when I finish recording, I basically want it to either, and this is going to change too, because, if depending on what we move our recording system to, the recordings may wind up getting auto recorded and saved somewhere in the cloud, as opposed to, to my machine like it does right now. And so if we wind up using some other system that does that, then as soon as it's recorded, then all I have to do is post a link to the file. Otherwise, it just tells them it's recorded, and then the editor should know where to go find it. But yeah, then the editor downloads the podcast episode. It tells them what sponsors are in there. All the banners are all set up. If we have any remnant space, which is just, a podcast sponsorship spot that doesn't get filled, then I have to manually fill those right now. So have it just automatically know, hey, look, we're filling with these. And so it could be a course that I've put together. It could be this is Ruby Rogues, and Dave's a panelist. And so, we've given him a killer deal or free, remnant space advertising on Ruby Rogues for Drifting Ruby. However that works, I like that. So that it just automatically gives all the information to the editor so they can just put it in. They don't have to come to me and say, hey, there's an open spot. Who do I fill it with? Mm-hmm. And so, so then when they're done, instead of having them, because right now they have access to the servers that serve the content via FTP, they have access to everything. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to restrict that so that instead what they do is they upload the file to this app, and then it in turn pushes it via FTP to the server. And that way it manages those credentials, and only the right people have access to put the right stuff in the right place. And then it auto-generates the links. It puts all that information into WordPress or wherever, and that all gets done. And then, like I said, it does all the outreach. Maybe it reaches out via Zapier and hits like Hootsuite or something so that you can do your social media planning or Buffer app or whatever you're using there. And that way the whole process is kind of managed front to back. And, some of these tools I just don't see the need to build, like social media management. I don't see a need to be in there. At the same time, you have all the information you need for a proper social media sharing in the RSS feed. So that kind of thing, I could see, hey, look, spend 5 minutes writing a tweet and a Facebook post, and then, and then it would just, put that together so that when it says, hey, guest, go share this, it takes them to a page that's, okay, click here to tweet this, click here to, Facebook this, click here to Instagram, click here to, and, so they can just go through it. And if they want to modify the text, they can. But at the end of the day, then all they have to do is click, 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 and it's all shared. It sends them a thank you. if there's any other kind of follow-up, for this show, for example, part of the follow-up is doing my Ruby story. And so, it invites them to the other show, all of that stuff. I'd also I'm currently using Pipedrive to do a lot of the outreach and tracking a lot of that. And I'd like to set up just some really simple, hey, you were on this show, would you like to come on this show? Or things like that, right? So that it makes some of those resources really easy to just kind of work a lot of those parallels. But that's kind of the gist of where I want to end up. There's podcast sponsorship end too, right? Where it's, as sponsors currently right now, what they can do in the system is they can change the talking points and they can upload new banners. I'd like to set up an email notification or Slack notification or something so that if they upload a new banner or they change the talking points because they want something different in their ad read, that it notifies me so that I can record it and then acknowledge it basically. And so I'd like to add some of those features in there as well. And then from there, as I get more podcasters using the system, a natural outgrowth of this, I think, eventually will be that we'll also wind up doing some kind of a marketing agency around podcasts. But that's way, way, way down the road. Like, I'm not even really thinking about that, but I've had a few people ask me, hey, can you help us find sponsors? And so for now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a sponsorship manager role to podcasts, and then people can assign that to people. And that way, if people want me to help them find sponsors, I can do that because I have the connections to the marketing people. And, and so I'm not really acting as an agency, but I'm sort of acting as an agency. But mostly it just opens things up so that I can manage that. And then, we can also set up commissions in there so that, if I send out a proposal to somebody with sponsorship stuff in there and then they pay it through Stripe, then it pays it into the system's account, and then it builds a list of EFTs that I have to send around later. So anyway, that's kind of the direction that I'm looking at heading.
I like it. Well, the idea that we can create something, organize it, the idea that this is, well, to be honest, my daughter and I recorded some podcasts, but getting the whole production together, it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of thinking. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of follow through.
Well, and even if you're the editor and the scheduler and everything else, maybe you're doing all of those different jobs, still having a system to track it all the way through, it just makes things a whole lot easier. And then the fact that it just, it manages your website for you and your feed for you and all that stuff, all the way up to people like, John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneur on Fire or something. He has a whole team of people that work on his stuff. And so then he can just say, okay, you have this role, you have this role, you'll have this role. And then, he kind of has a full picture role on it. And that way he can manage the production. He can be the producer of the show, but all the different parts, he doesn't have to worry about them unless something comes in and says, hey, there's a problem. It didn't release on time, or, you said you recorded at 10 o'clock and it's 5 o'clock now and we don't have it, or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think even though most of that's on the back end, I think to some degree, it'll just overall seem better to the end user, to the listeners.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing is that, right now, as we pull this all together, I think people are pretty used to it showing up on their phone or whatever. And so they get it and they listen to it and it sounds great. But I have to focus on like 10 different things. And so if I'm able to just focus on, hey, who's the best person to give us this content? How do we get the best quality out to people? I think you're right in those senses that, people can consistently rely on the experience they want. Hey, it comes out every Tuesday at, whatever time. And, the audio quality is always top notch, and the sponsorship messages are well produced, and so we can work on those things that are tangible to the listener, and I don't have to do all the juggling. I can actually just focus on what topics do people want or need to learn about, and who do we get to actually talk about them? And then how do we make that the best show possible?
Yeah.
I like it.
So, yeah, I mean, I spent way longer talking about that than I intended. And I wasn't even going to bring it up, but yeah, that's kind of the major thrust of this. But the other thing that's really funny about it is that, for me anyway, the listener gets a way better product with a whole lot less work being done on my part. And there's a whole lot less like flailing around trying to solve these problems because we already know how to solve them. You just follow the process.
Yeah.
And I think there are some parallels with that in code, right, too, where it's, instead of, I mean, sometimes there are just problems we haven't solved, so we got to figure that out. But sometimes we wind up, flailing about a bunch, and then it's, oh, well, if I had talked to the team member over here, or if we had actually talked about our process for, creating software, or if we had automated things through continuous integration or continuous deployment, or, any of these things, right, then we get to the point where, hey, this is just a solved problem, right? Okay, I need to do this. How do we do this? Well, we do it with these tools in these ways. And so I don't have to go figure it out. I just have to go implement it. And then it takes me an hour instead of 3 hours to go hunt through Stack Overflow to figure out how to do something that the guy sitting next to me already figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I look forward to those changes.
Yep, me too. It's a lot of work to get them in. I'm trying to get the sponsorship income up enough to where I feel like I can hire somebody to help me build it because I don't have time to do it full time. I have a few hours every week that I've scheduled to work on it, but I don't think that's enough to get it to where I want it to be in the amount of time that I want it to be. So,
yeah.
But anyway, it's funny because I talk about this system, and yeah, I have other podcasters saying, "Okay, so where do I get it?" And I'm like, it only partially exists at the moment.
It's great in my head though.
Yeah.
That's true of a lot of my systems.
Yeah, I imagine how good it's going to be when it's there. But yeah,
cool.
Anyway, so yeah. Well, I think we've been talking for almost an hour. Is there anything else that you guys want to bring up? Maybe your company's hiring, or I don't know, stuff you've been thinking about lately?
I don't think so. It's an exciting thing to be a part of this, though. I mean, to see what's happening, just to put out what we know that people are receiving it. I had an old friend from 25 years ago found us on Ruby Rogues. Like, oh, you're part of the community. He says, yeah, I was just looking for something new. Awesome. So it's nice to be part of something that can build people up and give people value.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I had I got invited on Facebook to a class of 98. Now you know how old I am. A class of 98 Facebook group for my high school. And, so they're like, well, where is everybody at? And so I'm, everybody kind of tells their story. And so I explain, I did programming for a while and podcasting and, and a few people, oh, I love podcasts. Does anyone listen to yours? And I'm like, yeah, a few people. But it's funny to see, podcasting wasn't even on the radar when we graduated high school. And, now it's kind of becoming, I don't know if it's a major media channel yet, but we're going that way. And it's really interesting to see, okay, the concepts behind this, and then the ways that we can all participate in the communities that we belong to. Yeah. It really is amazing. And then, to see the crossover from one community to the other. Another example is, when I moved into this house, one of my neighbors turned out to be a listener of Ruby Rogues.
Oh, wow.
And so, it was just a funny thing, we start talking and, oh, you do Ruby? Well, I do Ruby, and he's like, oh, wait, you're Chuck. Yeah, I'm Chuck, and yeah, it's just,
so,
yeah.
Have you ever had them on the show?
Nope. Nope, I haven't. But yeah, it's really interesting just to see how these different worlds collide in the ways that we can participate in the community.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do some picks. Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Dave, do you want to start us off?
Not really, because the only thing that I could really think of that's really got me excited over the past week is that I got a new computer, but its stupid price tag, it doesn't really make it or qualify it for a pick. But I picked up a iMac Pro, so they're $5,000 base, but by the time this is released, the sale's going to be over. But I picked it up at my local Micro Center for $4,000, which is a insane deal to me. And I had just been talking to the wife the night before about picking one up and paying the full price tag. Then I saw it was on sale at Micro Center. So maybe, I'm going to shout out to Micro Center. They're my pick because I love them. They have so much cool stuff, so much components. It's basically like a grocery store size store full of computer parts. So I like them.
Nice. You could pick the iMac Pro too.
Okay, there's my second pick, I guess. But the iMac Pro is awesome. It's a base model, but even at the base model, the thing just freaking screams.
Awesome. David, what are your picks?
I'm going to do a weird one, but we were talking about it, so let's stick with weird. There's a tool out there called Spacey, and so the idea is that it's a Python tool, it's a library, it's natural language processing. So the idea is that language drives things, and what we can learn from language matters. And so I'm not sure I like it. I'm not sure that I have quite all the control that I want to have yet, but I'm liking it. So between Spacey and then a commercial add-on called Prodigy, I can really quickly, in an hour or two, build a model around text that tells me what it means to me or how I could use that text. So in the idea of building better pipelines and connecting what is going on around me with what I need to pay attention to, I think Spacey's part of that. I think let's talk in a week or two and see if it really is. But I think so. I'm very, very impressed with the way they built this, and it's one way to build natural language processing models in Python.
Awesome. Cool. Now, one thing that we did talk about here too, since we're going to be way out there, mine's more out there. It's not even tech, but and it's really more the idea than the pick. So I'm just going to preface it by explaining that, because I know that the second I say it, some people are going to be like, oh, that's definitely not for me. But we talked about learning and just challenging your beliefs and challenging the way you think. And I ran across a podcast. So, I mentioned on the show before that I'm Mormon. And I ran across a podcast called Mormon Sunday School. And they talk about basically the curriculum for Mormon Sunday School every Sunday. And yeah, so folks, bear with me. There's a point to this. They kind of go beyond sort of the standard rote ideas that you can, that you only have time to bring up in a 40-minute lesson at church. Because they give you like 3 or 4 chapters to talk about out of the scriptures. And so, they've asked some challenging questions about, is this literal or figurative or both? And, some of the things that I had always taken very literally, like, for example, the flood. It's like, well, there's not a whole lot of geologic evidence for the flood, right? But at the same time, it's something that I had always taken literally. And I think I still believe it literally at this point. But at the same time, it made me really think, okay, so are they trying to teach me this kind of lesson or that kind of lesson out of the scriptures? Or does it, and I think we see this a lot in code and other things. So I guess what I'm telling people to do is just, go find some podcast or YouTube channel or video or something that really goes at the way that you frame your worldview. They're very faithful in the podcast, and they're like, look, we're not trying to challenge anyone's faith. So, we put all of our semi out there stuff in a different episode. But at the same time, I think it's healthy for people to go out and actually challenge their worldview. And so, it hasn't really shaken my faith per se, but it really has made me think about what I believe actually means, right? And how do I approach it, and how do I prove it out to myself? And it's a lot of this is subjective, a lot of it's personal experience, but it's important to think about. And to take this to the next level, and I'll probably wind up releasing the audio for this, pretty soon. But I had a conversation at NG Atlanta with Kim Creighton, and she's really fascinating. I don't know exactly how to explain who she is that does her justice. But we had a conversation about diversity and what it actually means. And usually when I talk to people about diversity, it's a war of talking points, And so people come, and they basically give their talking points for one side or the other. And she came at it completely differently, and just really, it's like, look, here's some of the numbers. Here's some of the evidence. Here's some of the ways that people think about it that's wrong. And here's some of the ways that people think about it that is somewhat constructive. But then also just opening up the dialogue, right? And so I feel like in a lot of ways, if we don't challenge our thinking and we don't talk about it with other people, and I'm really hoping that this is what this show is or becomes, to some degree. If we don't really talk about our differences and really talk about what we agree on and don't agree on, and we kind of shy away from confrontation, then we can't have the deep kinds of conversation that really bring people around to understand what's important. And so, I'm not sure that she really convinced me of too many things that I didn't already believe. And, some people have talked to me and they figure out pretty quickly that I'm fairly skeptical on some points of social justice, and I'm not on others. And so, I kind of piss both sides off. But at the same time, I mean, that's the kind of conversation we need to have. We need to really look at things and say, okay, what do we actually know? What is actually going to make a difference? What are we measuring that really matters? We do this with code. We do this with science, sort of. I mean, some scientists just come out to prove their own biases, and that happens too. But to be able to look at these things and actually evaluate them and figure out what this all means. And I'm not advocating any kind of moral relativism or anything like that. I'm really advocating that you think and then you talk to other people and just really understand what the points are and what the ideas are. So I am going to pick Mormon Sunday School podcast. I'm going to pick Kim Creighton and the stuff that she talked about. And, but mainly I just really want to, since I have a soapbox here, just advocate that, we have the conversations. Have the conversations that make you uncomfortable. Have the conversations with the people that really piss you off, and see if you can at least understand where they're coming from. Because if you can get there and then you can actually look at the facts together, you may be surprised at how you're both wrong about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
That fits something. I was reading a blog article as I was waiting to get onto this to record today. And it's written by Sahil Lavingia. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He's the guy that started Gumroad. Uh-huh. And he was in San Francisco, and he talked about his experience in San Francisco And then he changed how Gumroad runs, and he wanted to take a course by Brandon Sanderson in Provo. Mm-hmm. And so he moves from San Francisco to Provo, and he talks about that, about getting outside of our comfort zone, talking to people that we disagree with, experiencing life, and realizing that a lot of us, even though we were using a different dictionary and we're saying some of the same things anyway. So I'm going to have two picks, I guess, today. My other one will be that blog article because it's saying what Chuck's saying, of getting
Provo's weird,
putting ourselves out there. And Provo, yeah, it's the most conservative city in the United States above 100,000, and very Mormon, very very conservative, very white. So he had a lot of expectations of things, and then he came and had those expectations confounded. And he realized he had a lot more in common. And he realized getting out and talking to people that he wouldn't normally talk to, he learned a lot. Our worldviews matter, and being able to see that we have a worldview and challenge it or learn from it or grow it, that works.
I would say, I think it's awesome if people want to have those controversial talks where you're talking to someone with an opposing view. But if you can't put your own self aside, I mean, if someone's making a personal attack at you, then, they're just being a jerk. But those kind of conversations, they have to stay cordial. Yeah. If you can't talk to someone calmly with respect, think about what you are discussing, then the conversation is just going to end. They're going to think you're a jerk. You're going to think they're a jerk, and nothing was accomplished. Yeah. But, I have a lot of people who have very different views than I do, but we are great friends because we are able to have those conversations. They might get a little heated sometimes, just like, like they do, but they're never like insulting.
Right.
They may be insulted by my point of view and I by theirs, but we don't insult each other. We insult the principles or the beliefs, not one another. So,
yeah, I agree. And some people have a lot of themselves invested in their worldview, or they have a very fragile worldview. And if you're one of those people, I'm not advocating that you go out and like destroy your life, right? So, you need to be conscientious about where this is going to take you. But I think it's a healthy thing if you have enough self-confidence to go out and do this, to do it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite authors is Chaim Potok. He was a rabbi, and he grew up in Brooklyn in the 40s and 50s. And he was there when the Holocaust survivors were coming back. And he was part of an Orthodox community. And he was involved with a lot of anti-Semitism, and they had to have police guard their synagogues when he was growing up. And he writes these stories that are appealing and also honest to his experience. He had been a chaplain in the Korean War, and he had experienced a lot of things, and he'd been a great author. He wrote The Promise and The Chosen, My Name is Asher Lev, The Gift of Asher Lev, and lots of them, I Am the Clay. All these great books that go to the heart of what we're talking about today. Every one of these books are talking about being willing and honest to confront and to talk and to see the other person and still be who we are, and that it doesn't have to be a big war and a big battle. So here's a man who dedicated his whole life to what we're talking about. And I think he did it brilliantly. I actually named my son after one of his characters, Asher. Beautiful ideas and lessons in learning to be open and work with each other and figure it out.
Yep. All right. Enough mushy stuff. Let's go ahead and wrap this one up.
All right.
A fun day today.
Yeah. Well, I like having a little bit different on, the 50X episode. So anyway, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Hopefully you all got to know us a little bit better. Maybe we gave you something to think about. Who knows? But yeah, we'll be back next week with, just another regular episode. In fact, now that I'm working on this tool, I can actually tell you what the episode is. And I probably ought to do that as we do this. But next week we're going to be posting our Thwarting Insider Threats episode that we recorded with Greg Kushto. So definitely check that out.
Wait, so isn't that going to be released before this one's released?
Nope.
Oh, really? Okay, never mind. I'll shut up.
No, because this is 300 or 350, so we had to rearrange the schedule a little bit to get a 350 in there. So yeah. So anyway, so we'll catch you all next week with that one, and looking forward to another 350 episodes of Ruby Rogues.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Right. Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.